I think that you could try anarcho capitalism. I don't know that it would work long term, and I'm going to explain why I think that. So, as someone who likes the idea of a free market and allowing private businesses to operate and do what they want to do, I'm very pro-business in that regard. I'm a businessman myself. So, where I think the challenge comes in with anarcho-capitalism, I think to your question, is that companies or businesses can tend to bite off a bit more than they can chew. And when something like that happens, they end up becoming unprofitable, right? And then they just abandon a project. And that is kind of a problem. I think eventually it will devolve or evolve back, I guess, to a moderately regulated system, meaning, a small, again, remember, small government, because you're going to end up with, all cultures eventually end up with a government. And the reason they end up with a government of some kind is because of, well, just this problem. So I'll give you an example, for example purposes only. Let's say that, and I talked about this a while back, but I'm just going to dust this off and I'll use an example. Let's say that there's no regulation of any kind on any business. And so someone says, I'm going to open up a nuclear power plant. So they open up a nuclear power plant, they get a bunch of fissionable material, and they start making it work. And then somebody else comes along and does the same thing. And then somebody else does the same thing. And then somebody else does the same thing. And on and on and on. And here's the challenge with this kind of thing where it's completely unregulated, is that eventually, just like we're seeing right now, when markets get flooded, right, that means that the least profitable and inefficient end up going out of business. And in the case of, let's say that there's fissionable material, again, for example purposes only, and someone just abandons the operation, who cleans that up? Who's responsible for it? That's the problem. And so eventually people will end up evolving right back into saying, hey, we need to have some kind of regulation. Who do we get to regulate some of this? And then this is where you end up with your, for lack of a better term, elected officials. Now, there's a better way to go about all this. Again, hard currency solves a ton of the elected official issue, because then you don't have any soft money. Right, soft money is a industry term. It means, money. It means just handing politicians cash. It's a bribe. That doesn't exist, because your fungibility isn't, especially if you have the hardest currency. We all know what that one is. It's not as fungible as gold, and gold fungibility is really awesome. However, it's a little too fungible, and it allows for bribes that are much easier to get through the system. So that's sort of my thoughts on anarcho-capitalism. I'm good with it. I just don't know that, as with lots of other so-called systems or non-systems or what have you, eventually culture is going to give way to that, and people are going to say, hey, hold on a second here. We can't just let everything run completely wild like this. And because then people can get legitimately getting hurt. Okay, we're not talking about and this is where, I think to tie this off, this is where a lot of the leftist kids that go to the universities and they see the professors talking about unchecked capitalism and all that bullshit. And it's like, most of them still don't understand, like, dude, we haven't had actual free markets in this country for like 150 years. So, like, there isn't anything unchecked. It's the same group of people trying to run everything, and they end up doing more damage than they do good. And under the guise of, right now, of course, like I said in many other videos, we have this idea of, okay, well, we have like the big corporatocracy, man. It's really terrible, man. Unchecked capitalism, blah de blah. And it's like, you would have the same results if it was just a giant bureaucracy. A government bureaucracy. The end result is always the same. Okay, that's the trick. That's why you have to have a culture, and a culture that actually prizes the idea of thinking shit through, for many years in the future. But that's a different video.